Hello Internet, it's Skorkowski, and today I want to discuss something that I have used in role-playing games since the very beginning, and that is critical hit and fumble tables. Now, a lot of people are very familiar with the idea of critical hits and fumbles. They've been around forever. They weren't officially part of Dungeons & Dragons, at least until 2nd edition. However, they'd been considered something that was in house rules long before that. And now everyone is kind of familiar with the idea of a critical hit and a fumble table. I mean, they are, after all, mean gold. Now, a lot of people don't use a table for that, and some people love them, some people hate them, some people just have never used one. And I never really thought about the fact that a lot of people just didn't use critical hit and fumble tables just because I always had, and you kind of think that everybody kind of does stuff the way you do. And then I did a video over player folders, and in that I was kind of flipping through one showing the standard loadout of what I give to my players whenever we start a campaign. And it came to the critical hit table, and I was like, just ignore that, that's a house rule. And a lot of people were like, wait, hold on, what is that? I want to know more. So we're going to go over the critical hit and fumble tables. Now ours, this is something that was descended from the early 80s that my game master gave to me when we first started playing, and it was a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, had those ugly lines down, and it was really ugly. So finally I just had to retype it out on a computer, that way it looked nice and clean. And this is one that we used for both 1st and 2nd edition D&D, and it served us very well over the years. Then we converted to Cyberpunk 2020, and in that system they did have a fumble table, and it was really cool in the fact that it was able to specify whether it was a reflex or a tech or an empathy skill that the player was rolling and how the fumble affected that. They didn't have a critical hit table, but then later we moved to Interlock Unlimited fan mod for Cyberpunk, and that included a critical hit table with some really cool features on it. Later, when we converted to 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, I took our 30-year-old critical hit table and I updated it for the newest edition. Crits were official in the rules now, and one thing that we then had to specify on the critical hit table is that we could only use it if a natural 1 or a natural 20 actually came up on the dice. 5th edition had critical hits for different types of things, such as a thief's sneak attack. And originally we tried to use the table for anything that 5th edition said was a critical hit in 5th edition, and it ended up overpowering the game quite a bit. You know, thieves became just powerful as heck, and we just didn't want to use it every time. So for anything that wasn't a 20 or a 1, we used just the normal 5th edition, does twice damage critical hit. But if it came up a 20 or a 1, that's when we busted out the table, and that's when things got fun. Now to break it down, on the critical hit portion, which is the top portion, instead of just doing more damage, this one ranges from max damage to quadruple max damage. There are additional things such as getting to roll an additional attack, or the opponent having to roll on the fumble table, or maybe the hit damages their armor, or blinds them, or severs a limb. Fumbles, there's a lot of dropped swords, and with dropped weapons, we just rolled a d12, and 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock just determined the direction that the sword or weapon flew. For bows, we ended up saying that a lot of it was broken bow strings, because it didn't make as much sense that the bows are flying out of their hand, although sometimes we did. And our group got pretty used to the fact that everybody carried an extra bowstring on them all the time because there were a lot of broken bowstrings. But there are other features such as losing your next attack, hitting yourself, hitting your buddy, or even breaking your weapon. The bottom portion is just notes regarding different conditions or movement for getting up, picking up a weapon. That way all the rules that might come into effect due to a critical hit or a fumble were all right there, and we didn't have to slow down the game to find the rules to see how we handle everything. Now normally as a game master, I didn't carry one behind my screen. I already had so much back there, my maps and my notes and all that. But since I'd given one to all my players, whenever I needed a critical hit or a fumble, I would just roll the dice and call for, hey guys, I need the fumble table or the critical table. Now one thing is just kind of fun for dramatic reasons is if I rolled a fumble, I wouldn't always just declare, oh, I fumbled. No, I'd kind of give a face, kind of a mean little face, and I'd pick up my dice and I'd roll them, and everybody knew I was rolling percentage dice, and I'd throw them on the table, and everyone's bracing themselves for whatever horrible damage I just did. And then I would be like, I need a fumble of a 33, and everyone would just give this huge sigh of relief, and they'd clamor to find what's on the table to see how bad the bad guy screwed up. Now, with critical hits, we have had a ton of great memories, wonderful moments of, victory getting yanked from the jaws of defeat and that sort of thing. However, the Fumble Table has actually given us the most fun and the funniest memories over all the years. I once had a player whose character fumbled 4 times in a row against a bad guy, and the villain finally just kind of stopped and looked at him because it was just, he couldn't get it together, and the bad guy found that kind of funny. We once had a druid in our group that had 2 dogs as their animal companions, and no matter which dice they were rolling, one of those dogs always critted, the other dog always fumbled. Same dog each time. It was really weird. One time we also had a party of 7 players all fumble at the exact same time, which completely defies probability, but anybody that's been playing long enough knows that probability goes out the window once D&D dice are involved and anything goes. And we had to kind of explain that as like, well, you know, the monk screwed up and they punched the wall, and the dwarf was shocked and he ended up throwing his axe over here, and this player fell down because they're trying to dodge that axe that came flying at them. It ended up becoming this huge chain reaction where out of the blue the entire party just screwed up, and it was really funny and we had a lot of fun with it, even though as the players it wasn't actually the best thing. There's also been a lot of good things that have happened with it, one of which being NPCs, random nameless NPCs that sort of roll their way into legendary status, mostly due to the critical hit table. One time we had players that were going into this mines because they were trying to free all the slaves and kill all the slavers down there. And the PCs got a bunch of the guards from the local town, which were all halflings, and they go in there with a couple halfling red shirts. The NPCs aren't meant to last that long. It's just kind of add to the fight. And they all died pretty quickly except for one lucky little guy named Wiggus who only rolled 20s. And not just 20s, he's rolled like really, really good 20s, like severing limbs and getting multiple attacks around, and just was an unstoppable force of nature. And it was so funny, and this became an epic character that was originally meant to be just a random red shirt that wasn't meant to live, and now I can remember this NPC's name 16 years later. Now for the starting packages that I give my players, there's links down below in the video description. Feel free to use them, change them up, do whatever you want. That's part of what makes RPGs so beautiful, is what works for me might not work for you, but what works for you might not work for me, and maybe you can change this up and come up with something that's way cooler than anything I've ever thought of, so feel free to use it, improve it, and have fun. Now, I know a lot of people hate the idea of the critical table and the fumble table, especially the fumble table, and I know that because I've met them, and I've heard every single argument can be made. I've had a player look at me dead in the eyes and tell me that an epic character should never, ever fall down. Well, what do you think about that, Matt Mardigan? And as for heroes dropping their weapons, yeah, I have never seen a movie where the hero gets disarmed and all of a sudden they have to clamber through this fight, dodging blows. Maybe they pick up a frying pan to use it as an improvised weapon as they're kind of deflecting blows before they power slide across the floor and grab their sword. And also, don't always think of it as if they drop their weapon, that they just have greasy fingers and they drop their sword. You could say like, well, they made the attack and then it was deflected and then they were disarmed. Game Master can define whatever it means to say that they dropped their weapon, not that they're just throwing their weapons left and right, although sometimes it's kind of funny to say that is what they're doing. Naysayers have told me that severing a hero's appendage will just ruin the character and it's horrible and it destroys the game. Well, yeah, tell that to Luke Skywalker. And as far as breaking a weapon, some people can't believe, though, it even suggests that that be possible. But do you remember in Excalibur when Excalibur broke? Or what about a Isildur sword? Oh, and remember that spear, Dragon Slayer, in the movie Dragon Slayer? Yeah, that broke too. In a universe with magic and regeneration and all sorts of fantastical powers, if a PC dropping their sword or breaking their weapon or losing an appendage will destroy the game that you play, then you play very differently than I do, and you play very differently than a lot of the popular fiction that gaming is trying to emulate. However, for any of the naysayers in the audience, I'm going to throw you a bone here. I have been using these tables for over 25 years, and I have some very true and very real horror stories of the worst possible situations that I have encountered. First one, and hand to God this is true, when I was 13 years old, my very first game of Dungeons & Dragons, we did the Temple of Elemental Evil. Our characters, we started off at this moat house, and we split the party up, and I know you're not supposed to split the party up, but come on, I was 13, it was my very first game. I wandered into a room, and there were some giant rats in here, and the rats surprised me. They rolled a hit, got a critical, and severed my arm. Now, the GM said that it didn't actually rip my arm completely off, that it just tore all these ligaments and everything, and the cleric was able to heal the hit points. But the cleric didn't have magic powerful enough to actually reattach everything in my arm to get it working again. So I ended up going through this entire dungeon with my arm in a sling. This is probably a good time to mention that my character was an archer and I couldn't shoot my bow. In fact, I spent pretty much the entire game with my arm in a sling, and I'd walk up to the door and I'd open it, I'd get out of the way, and the rest of the PCs would charge in there and kill whatever bad guys were in there. This was my very first game of D&D and my very first combat of D&D. I lost my arm before I ever got to even roll. Now, fast forward a couple years, I'm now 15 years old. I'm now being a game master, and I'm running a game with my very first red dragon. And dragons in first edition, they actually kind of shirked him out on hit points. So I added 100 hit points to whatever the base was. The players, they've gone through the whole dungeon. They're at the final room. They know the dragon is in there. So they take the paladin because he's the best fighter. And they give him all the cool spells like, bless and protection from fire, that sort of thing. And once their plan is in place, they go running in. Half the party goes left, half the party goes right. That way the breath weapon can't get them all. And that paladin just goes cutting straight up the middle. As for the initiative roll, Paladin wins the initiative. I'm thinking, great, this is going to be a good fight. Paladin wins the initiative, good start. Rolls the dice, gets 20. Thinking, good start, this is going to be a tough fight. Got a critical hit, way to go. Rolls the percentage dice, comes up 100, and the whole room goes quiet. Everybody is looking at these percentage dice, and everybody knows what it means, with the exception of the player of that Paladin, who then asks, so what happened? And one of the other players looks up and goes, dude, you killed it. And the whole room erupts and cheers and high fives, and everyone is so excited because they just owned this thing. It never got a chance to do anything. And as the game master, I'm kind of caught up at the moment. This is fun. We're having a great time. But at the same time, my entire finale just got thrown out the window due to the critical hit table, and I was really disappointed. But at the same time, I had fun, and I loved it, and I still love critical hit and fumble tables. So I recommend that if you've never tried one, give it a try, see if you like it. I hope you love them because my players and I do. Now, for any game masters in the audience and players, you don't want to listen to this next part. Whenever I do my later on video about what I call GM Black Ops, about all the sneaky, dirty little stuff that you do behind the game master screen that the players don't want to know about, but they secretly appreciate that you do it as long as they don't know about it, critical hit and fumble tables are a freaking godsend. One example would be if you've got a case where your players, their characters are just really overpowered, and you've got your fighter, he's wading through kobolds, just swinging a sword around, laughing because these things can't possibly make it through his armor. And in case one of them does, he's got so many hit points and these things do so little damage that there is no way this is even going to hurt his day. Well, that's when you have that one kobold with that sharpened stick, get that critical hit, and it just puts the fear in him because this isn't just double damage. This is something terrible. And now this is a fight that people are concerned about. This is a fight that they care about, and that makes it a lot more fun than just like, okay, you go through and you slaughter all the kobolds, unless, of course, the point was for them to do that. But if you want to make it fun and you want to give them the fear, critical hit at the right time will do it. Now, this is not something that you want to ever overdo. Don't want to make it look like it was obvious that you're doing this, so don't do it very much. But every once in a while, when you give the players that little bit of fear, table is good for it. But the other use that's way more important than being able to hurt the players at a certain time is when you need an NPC to fumble at the right time. For example, let's say you've got a party, you've got 6 players, but then at the last second, 2 people can't make the game, and then one of the characters, he gets poisoned or something takes him mostly out of commission, and then the other 3 that are left, they're kind of in this dungeon, and they're rolling badly, and it's not going very well for them, but they finally make it to the big bad. And now they're going to be facing this Death Knight, and you're expecting it to be 6 characters, but you've only got 3.5, and you really don't want to just total party kill and wipe out the party. But at the same time, you also don't want to give them the victory, and you don't want to make it seem too easy. And that's when you have that fumble pop up at the right moment. And that's when that Death Knight might drop that 2-handed sword and have to pull out that short sword and keep going, which he still does damage, but not as much as they were doing before. Or you can have that villain fall down, and now they're prone, and the PCs have one round just to get in there and do as much damage as they can since they've got all the bonuses, and that's going to even up the playing field. And having your bad guy fumble at the right time in order to even up the playing field can make a huge difference between a game that's just this total party kill and everyone's kind of disappointed at the end, or one of those close call, oh my god, that was so great, I can't believe we pulled it off, epic stories that your players talk about for years. So, Once again, down in the video description, I've got the links for both the original version with the player's pack that we used for first and second edition, and this thing came from back in the 80s. I also have the 5th edition update, and of course, use it if you like to, don't if you don't want to. Feel free to change it up, mix it up, make it unique for your own campaign. Have fun with it. Give it a spin, and I hope you love it as much as my players and I have. Thank you for watching. And of course, please like and subscribe. Please share this video and check out my other videos. Until next time, players, have a great day.